it's mental ping pong having kids. We love our kids, but as soon as you're done, and you're not even quite done answering the question that one kid asks, another kid says something totally different, a totally random question about, do dead people, does the hair grow on their skin? I don't know, something totally random. And you just go ping pong all over the place. It's like a pinball machine, I think my wife compared it to.
Hello and welcome to the Dad Dialogue Podcast, the show where we talk about the successes and the stresses of becoming a dad and being a dad. My name is Laurence. Thank you so much for being with us today. A quick reminder before I introduce today's guest, you can go over to daddialogue.co.uk if you'd like to sign up to be a guest on a future episode. So joining me today is Mark Ward. Mark has a YouTube channel called Ward on Words that you may be familiar with. Maybe you've come over from there. He uses that channel to talk about the Bible, different translations of the Bible, share some of his theological background and studies, and very, very interesting channel, which is how I kind of discovered him. And I reached out to him because of that channel. He was very gracious to offer up some time to come and share his stories of being a dad to 3 kids with us on the Dad Dialogue Podcast. We jump into a few different topics, such as Christian schooling, as well as just raising kids up within a Christian mentality and a Christian mindset. So lots of things that we discuss. It was super fun conversation. There were, unfortunately, a couple of technical issues with our recording. If you are watching the video on YouTube, you might notice Mark's video freeze from time to time. The audio is absolutely fine. There's no problems there. We did also lose a tiny bit of footage. So you'll see me, present me or future me, pop up a couple of times just to clarify a few points and to add in a bit of extra information because of some of the footage that was lost, just so that it is all understandable for you in the present where you are listening to this or watching this right now. So with all that being said, let's get into the conversation. Mark, thank you so much for taking the time and coming on the Dad Dialogue Podcast with us. Can you just start off by telling our listeners just about your family?
Yeah, my wife, Laura, and I have 3 children. They are 15, 13, and 10, boy, girl, boy. We live in the beautiful Pacific Northwest in Washington, and we live close enough to a road that I can hear loud motorcycles that just went by just now. Yeah. I am building an office/studio in my garage, and I have put a little extra money, some of it donated by kind YouTube viewers, into insulation. So hopefully I won't hear that, but that is still in construction. I'm actually wearing casual clothes in part today because theoretically I'm going to do some more drywalling this afternoon. And then after that, I'm going to go play ultimate Frisbee. Among the many things I could say about my family, it's mainly my wife, run a little flower farm on the property. And it's a real delight to us. My 2 younger kids are at Christian school right now. My eldest is at a hybrid homeschool program that's actually right across the street from our house in God's providence. Okay. We've been here 10 years. Boy, what else can I say? Any other introductory stuff that would be helpful? I'm happy to answer.
We'll dive into a few different things. Christian school specifically would like to chat about a little bit later, as well as the homeschooling as well. That's definitely an interesting balance. I'm sure you can share what the heart behind some of those decisions were. But I'm shifting over to you a little bit. I'm sure as someone who is a YouTuber, a writer, lots of other kind of skills, designer, you must have worked on your answer to the question, what do you do, so many times? I've had lots of people ask you that. But I'm curious, if I were to ask your 15-year-old, what does his dad do? What do you think he would say?
Yeah, I actually asked this a couple of weeks ago, and it's terrible. I've forgotten what my kids said. They mostly got it right. I think they would say that dad does church web design and YouTube. And that's pretty much right. There are various other things that aren't quite church web design that I do in design, like in fact, I use the app called InDesign to design the Themelios Theological Journal. I really enjoy that. I try to use my skills to serve the church when it comes to design. I don't think I'm all that great, but I really do love using whatever skills I have and tools to serve the church. And then on the video side, it's not just YouTube. I also have been able to teach for Right Now Media with a course that's out now, the top 10 Hebrew words every Christian should know. It is also on my YouTube channel. It's the lone thing that's behind a paywall because I'm contractually obligated to keep it there. And then I teach in various seminaries in various ways. sometimes in person, usually online. And I'm writing, and I think my kids know that. Yeah, because I've been sharing with them the prayer request recently, basically, as I've been exploring a possible book contract. I've been sharing that with them. So I think they would get it right if you asked, what does dad do?
Okay. Do they think it's cool that you're in the YouTube space? Because I would have thought at least teenagers, the ones that I've interacted with, they all want to be YouTubers when they grow up, right? Is that where your kids are at as well? Or?
I don't know. They kind of take it for granted, and my eldest son is very matter of fact about things, and ever since he was young, he was fascinated with the Guinness Book of World Records, and he had it practically memorized. He had multiple different iterations of them. Just he would come out with these facts. In fact, I'll never forget. This is a rabbit trail, but it's good for a parenting podcast. Probably when he was 11 or 12, one of my other children asked a question about some, trivial pursuit type thing. And everybody's eyes turned naturally to my eldest son and not to me. And I realized I have lost the crown of top knowledge in this family, at least when it comes to these things. And it is really impressive how much he could memorize. So anyway, he's very impressed with stats. And I remember him at some point, mentioning, Dad, you're not famous on YouTube because you have X number of subscribers. And I was like, yes, you are right. I have nothing compared to what, famous musical artists and politicians and whoever have. So yeah, I don't know if they're impressed or not. They seem to me to kind of take it for granted, but it's true. I have nothing compared to the guys in the Guinness Book of World Records for YouTube subscribers.
So we touched on it a little bit about Christian school, but I understand you also went to a Christian school?
I did, yeah. Except for 3 months in kindergarten, I went to an American public school. But after that, it was all Christian school, all the way from K through 12 through college and grad school.
So has that informed your choices for your kids? Was there ever a decision point of not sending them to Christian school, or was it always like an obvious choice?
Yeah, I mean, I really believe in Christian education. I also do not believe in binding other Christians' consciences with regard to things the Bible does not directly address. So I can certainly imagine situations in which you would send your child to the local public school. I think that's still true in America. I can't speak for the UK, and maybe I know a little bit about Canada. I know Tim Challies has talked about this a little. Homeschool is something we also did for 7 years. And I have now come to realize, certainly at, middle school up to high school, our family is not suited for it. And although the Classical Conversations program that we used, I think was very good in so many ways, and our kids speak that way as well. It was a burden on my wife that I wish I did not put on her, to be honest, especially toward the last couple years. She did it, and she loves the Lord and she loves our children, and so she sacrificed herself, but it weighed her down and almost crushed her. So there are some women who just nail it and love it, and more power to them. And I'm not criticizing my wife at all, but it just didn't suit our family. So we found a little Christian school. I'll get into it a little bit. I don't mind saying this publicly. There's a Christian school, a beautiful Christian school, 2 doors down from us. Like right next to us is the public school homeschool hybrid, and right next to them is the local Christian school that's been around for a long time, has a lot of resources. It does a lot of things really well. We did send our eldest there for kindergarten the first year we were here because we had a baby and just didn't feel we could handle homeschooling at that point. But they tolerated doctrinal compromise with especially one teacher, and my church came into open conflict between the leadership, and it was really sad. The families I know that pulled their kids out of that Christian school are not rabble rousers and fighters and nasty people who are just looking for an excuse to have a conflict. They're gracious, mature Christian people that I've been involved in ministry with now for years. So I took it very seriously that the people I respect at my church pulled their kids out. That's an evolving situation. Now I'm friends with a new Bible teacher, and he's a solid guy. And maybe I could see my kids going there again. I'm actually hopeful because I really believe in Christian education. But with our eldest, we ultimately had to decide that openly secular education was better than compromised Christian education, because the antithesis that Cornelius Van Til would talk about was just more clear. But there is a K through 8 Christian school up the hill from us, really sweet little community, and we've invested ourselves there the last 2 years. We're starting our third. Our eldest, our middle child is in 8th grade, and we're praying that next year they will be able to start a high school program. The church pulled their kids out. That's an evolving, praying that the Lord would allow us to send our kids, all 3 of them, through Christian school, if at all possible.
Yeah, no, it totally makes sense. Can you just explain a little bit about what the day-to-day looks like? And for anyone who's not a Christian or has never experienced a Christian school or has any idea, how much of the day is, quote unquote, like Christianese, if that makes any sense, like a Bible-based like teaching?
Well, I happen to have on my desk, give me 1 second, in my big pile of books, I have the 2nd edition of a textbook.
Hello, future Laurence here, just to say that this was part of the footage that we unfortunately lost. Mark goes into detail here, talking about the experience that he has had within a Christian school for his children and also for himself, and how the idea of Christian schooling from his perspective and his experience is primarily seeing God and Jesus and the Holy Spirit in every aspect of a kid's learning. So it's not really a case of putting things into boxes and kind of opening up the maths box and leaving the Jesus box alone, or, opening up a box about language and leaving the God box alone. He really spoke about the beauty of seeing God's creation in everything that comes together, whether it be numbers within maths, whether it be other aspects of nature and humanities and geography and history. And it's the way he spoke about it, from what I remember, obviously we lost the footage, is just really try to bring everything together to make the holistic education really, really apparent, in that God is through everything. And it's not a case of just kind of putting God and the Bible on the shelf whilst we study languages or whilst we study mathematics or different subjects, if that makes sense. I wasn't able to express it as wonderfully as I remember him doing it, but that's just kind of fill in the blank here in terms of before we jump into the next part of the discussion of other experiences of Christian schooling. So let's get back to the conversation.
So kids at Christian schools are fallen too, and they engage in some of the same kinds of sinful behaviors as the kids at the secular schools. But whereas at our local secular school, my home discipleship group had a woman who was a paraeducator there, and she came to our group and just worn out practically every time. And she said, the kids bite me and kick me and hit me. And the principal, instead of backing me up, says, well, I'm glad that this child feels that this is a safe space in which he can express his big feelings. And that's a non-Christian worldview that is literally stopping the educational process. Because here in kindergarten, this woman told me that if a child is freaking out and acting up, the whole class will leave that child in the classroom with the paraeducator. And I just thought, this cannot continue. And people at a Christian school have a Christian understanding of behavior and of sin, and are able to call it what it is. And that, I think, helps the atmosphere of education be more conducive to education.
That's really interesting. Thanks for the detailed answer. I just want to pick up on a few things, because I was brought up in England. I actually went to a Church of England primary school, even though my family weren't really Christian. And I think the biggest thing from England's perspective in general, in terms of their education and lots of other aspects, is like, it's a very traditionally Christian country, but no one really goes to church. Like, obviously this was when I was being grown up. So like, we could send you to the C of E school. That's great. But we don't talk about it at home. Maybe we'll go to church at Christmas, maybe at Easter, at a push sort of thing. But that school, all it really had was like, the only thing I ever remember from it was, we've got the whole world in our hands. Like that, we always sung that song in assembly every week, sort of thing. Fast forward to, I actually was a teacher for a little while when I lived out in Hong Kong. And the first job I worked was as an English teacher, was in a Christian school. And it was like a bilingual school. So I was the English teacher in with a Chinese teacher at the same time for all the lessons. And the only thing that I could see that was overtly Christian about their education was that if you went onto their website, about 80% of the teachers had Proverbs 22:6 quoted on their little profile. It was all in Chinese, but I could see the 22:6. I was like, okay, I know what that is. But beyond that, we had an assembly like once a week in the intercom where they would announce, they'd have a verse for the week. But that was essentially it. And all the English teachers that were hired, and none of them were Christian. So like my manager, the assistant, all the other English teachers that were hired weren't Christian. So if they ever had a question, I have to do the assembly. How do I say Galatians? Like I have to read this. How do I say it? They would always come to me. And it just kind of speaks volumes to how much the parents know about that choice they're making. And I think it's a similar situation just to England. A lot of people might send their kids to Catholic school because the Catholic school in their area has the highest grades, the best developmental process, and this, that, and the other.
Right.
But they're not inherent. There's no Christianity, Protestant or Catholic within their hearts. They don't know Jesus. They don't know God. But we'll get our kid baptized so that they can go to the Catholic school because it's got good marks. And it's interesting just how fallen from different places these different places are. And now I live in the Netherlands, where there are no Christian schools. Future Laurence here again. I have to interrupt myself because I have just said a straight up lie in terms of Christian schools within a Dutch environment. I realized after this interview that the reason I said this was that I was parroting back something that someone else had told me, and I hadn't done my due diligence of doing my own research and actually informing myself of that. Something that I try to not do as much as possible, but it just kind of slipped out. So I had that idea and mindset formed by other people, but it's not true. And I've done a bit of more research into it. Just quick tangent. It is very interesting, Christian schooling within the Netherlands, in that it was kind of obviously built alongside the Reformation in the 16th century. And then during the Enlightenment period, that came into a lot of discussions. And then there was very high tensions around Christian schooling in the 1910s, around the time of the First World War. And now there are places that will call themselves Christian schools, but from what I've seen and the research that I've done, they are Christian schools by name and by not really much else. And their values and their vision and their mission are often can tell that they've been based on a Christian worldview, but they've actively removed any reference to the Bible or God or Jesus or the Holy Spirit. There are some schools that would call themselves Reformed schools, which are more based in the Bible, but not as commonly found. And I didn't see any primary schools, at least anywhere near me, that would fall into this bracket. All that being said, I did a bit of research to find this out. I apologize for the straight up lie that I said in this episode. I hope you can forgive me. And you're not allowed to homeschool. The only allowance they will ever make for you to homeschool is if you want it to be overtly Christian or another religion. I think you can apply for exceptions to your education, but I think they believe so firmly in their education that they offer as a public sector. And then there's only really a few institutes that offer private education, which is more of an international perspective, which is where my wife works as a teacher. So yeah, it's a super fascinating situation. I actually remember one other school where I used to live in Asia where I applied to, and that was on the completely other side. There was like a 10-page application where you had to answer like theological questions. So give like essays about certain things of like, give us an essay about hell, like these sorts of things. So kind of like get to the heart of if you are someone that they can trust to teach Christian worldview to children. So that's just kind of how I've kind of picked up on what you're putting down there. It's just fascinating. Like all around the world, it's a completely different thing that's been put across.
Yeah, it feels bizarre to me that there could be a place that calls itself a Christian school and takes their Christianity no more seriously than did the one you described, where there's literally no Christianity aside from non-Christians reading verses and people having verses on their profiles. It's a betrayal of the Reformation's recovery of education as an important part of fulfilling God's call to dominion in Genesis 1:26 through 28. Yeah, so, I mean, I think messed up people, which is what we all are, we're all fallen, we're all finite, we can still end up doing good through Christian schools that have insufficiently Christian worldviews, but why would we be satisfied with that? I think the call of secularism, the push of secularism, is not actually, and hasn't been up until, I don't know, this is changing a little bit now, but it isn't actually saying Christianity is wrong. It's saying Christianity is private. Keep your religion to yourself. So I often tell an illustration that I got from Brian Smith at BJU Press of an economics textbook that was written by a particular Christian teacher, and she was talking about economic modeling, trying to figure out price futures and what's the price of corn going to be in Australia in next year, I don't know. And you have to build a model to try to predict it. And then there's a little sidebar that says, kids, Jesus is our model. And there's multiple ways in which that's wrong. One is because you had to use a silly pun that any kid could see through to try to bring Jesus into this. What you're actually saying is that Jesus has nothing to do with economic modeling. And then to put it in a sidebar is quite literally to put it to the side, to say that we can have a big, long talk about economic modeling, but Christianity has nothing to say about this. Now, what Christianity has to say might be complex. It might have to do with God's sovereignty over nations. And maybe you don't, go deep into it with fourth graders, but you're never allowing yourself to think, this little aspect that I'm teaching today, this has nothing to do with the lordship of Christ. Jesus is not over this. I can take some time off as a disciple now. Now I'm just a citizen of my national kingdom and not a citizen of heaven. No, in my perspective, which has been shaped by the Dutch Reformed tradition, Abraham Kuyper and Herman Bavinck. I've got Herman Bavinck on my desk, Reformed Ethics. I believe, along with Kuyper, he said famously, there's not a single square inch of this entire universe over which Christ, who is Lord over all, does not cry, mine. So I never want to, I'm never willing to teach with my hand tied behind my back. I have to be able to proclaim Christ's lordship over everything.
Yeah, that's really powerful. And as we're talking about teaching, I wanted to get in a little bit of, as a parent, teaching their children the Bible and leading their children to Jesus. And as someone who is well-versed in the original languages of the Bible, Hebrew and Greek, have there ever been times when you're trying to teach your children, like to bring them up in the way of the Lord, and there's some difficulty just in terms of maybe how much you know and trying to get them to kind of get on board? Or have you, I guess another point of that question is, have you ever engaged with any kid Bible or Christian resources that have kind of irked you the wrong way, or have kind of maybe not been true to your beliefs? Or
those are two big questions. If I understand you correctly on the first one, I do struggle, and I have struggled over time. This has happened so many times, and your kids are 4 and 2, so you're probably just getting there. But my wife and I still laugh. We have a 15-year-old, 13-year-old, and 10-year-old. This happened literally yesterday. We just feel like it's mental ping pong having kids. We love our kids, but as soon as you're done, and you're not even quite done answering the question that one kid asks, another kid says something totally different, a totally random question about, do dead people, does the hair grow on their skin? I don't know, something totally random. And you just go ping pong, all over the place. It's like a pinball machine, I think my wife compared it to. And what I found is as of age 3, certainly 5, my kids are asking, Dad, why did God let Adam sin? And my problem is not that I don't have an answer to that. It's that I have no idea how to relate this to a 5-year-old. And by the time I even get half a sentence out, he's on to something different. And it's humbling. So that's been a continual difficulty. Now that my eldest 2 are teenagers, it's getting easier. I find it easier to relate to teenagers than to kids. Kids are more fun in some ways, but teenagers, I don't know, they're budding adults. And so that there's some real joys there. Then when it comes to resources, well, I'm pretty persnickety about what resources I choose. And I know publishers and I know writers. And so I just didn't ever buy the stuff that was no good. So it didn't really enter my home. The one exception was, a dear relative of ours gave the children a board book from Walmart. Even in England, I think they know about Walmart. And it was the story of David and Goliath. So this is for like 2-year-olds, and the whole story of David and Goliath manages not only to make David the hero as opposed to God.
Yeah.
Not only does it manage to not make it clear that Goliath was killed, he just got a bump on the head and looked like he was sleeping. Not only is it also not clear that Goliath was challenging not David and Israel, but the God of Israel. But God is literally not mentioned in the entire story. And, that was an easy no. I confiscated that book. But I've had better resources to give to my kids. The New City Catechism is one we've used. We've watched some Bible Project videos. And then often what we do is just talk about a Bible verse or two. I just keep it as simple as possible because I do find being a Bible expositor, I probably do tend to talk too long. So I want to get discussion going.
Yeah, no, that's really good. That's really good to hear. It's interesting you mentioned the Bible Project, because the reason I think about this so much is I can't remember if it was Tim or John, but one of them had mentioned that one of the kids' resources that they had used once, it spoke about the story of Jonah, but it basically finished at chapter 3. At the end of chapter 3, It was like Jonah goes to Nineveh and tells them, or he ends up in Nineveh and he tells them that they need to repent, and they repent, and Jonah's happy, and that's it. And it just cuts out the whole of the last chapter, and he was just like, but that's not the point. That's not why we have that story.
Right.
So the whole thing is supposed to be there. We can still make things open for children, but we don't need to hide the message and just make Jonah some hero about some amazing story about coming out of a big fish. And I think that's kind of what you're getting at with David and Goliath, because I think I had a bit of a struggle sometimes of reading. We mainly have 2 Bible books. We have like a Jesus Calling Kids book, which primarily is pretty good because it tries to bring in Jesus to most of the stories. It's not just kind of glorifying the heroes, that like giving it a hero mentality that some kind of resources do. But I think even if I look back when my kids were really young, I would purposefully maybe change some of the language so that Goliath didn't die. Goliath just like fell down. And I think I've been challenged a bit more recently. I recently purchased I guess you would know him as N.T. Wright, but Tom Wright has brought out My Big Bible Storybook. And I was just a bit more embracing it, just like, I'm just going to read what he says because, I'm sure him and his team have decided on this. And I know my kids are 4 and 2, but if these conversations are going to come up, like my 4-year-old's already hearing about killing people and dying at school. Like people talk about this is how they play, and I'm not super happy about it. I don't want him to play with guns or play fighting or play killing. But if there's any way to kind of talk about it and use this language safely, it would be through the Bible. And even my 2-year-old, with the Tom Wright book, he's starting to see little connections because it will have a section. It's like, where else does this story link up to it? And it might be, various links to different pages, and we'll flick through, and it's like, oh, there's 2 circles on this one, and this links back, and it's like, I think that's been a really good purchase of ours.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's nice to kind of hear. And I think again, it comes down to making those big decisions of cutting out like that board book you said, and we're just not going to use it. We'll just move on.
Right. Yeah. It's a real challenge. What I feel sometimes like being a parent in this day and age means being a permanent media critic, having to say yes or no to this or that show or this or that movie. And then it's true too of books. What do I let them read? And then at what point do I let them make their own decisions? When it comes to theology, that's where I'm on my firmest ground. And I liked the Jesus Storybook Bible because it was by Sally Lloyd Jones, and I think put out by Crossway. It made the point that is so important, that God does not buff up the image of Bible characters. They are often pretty mean to one another, Sally Lloyd Jones points out. Another thing that I think is really important, I feel like I'm getting this from C.S. Lewis or Tolkien, and I'm embarrassed that I've forgotten the source of this, but one of them I think defends, this might be Tolkien on fairy stories, defends the violence. Like, for example, in Cinderella, in the original story, or some version of the original. Who can say what the original was? But the ugly stepsisters cut off their heels in order to be able to put the Cinderella slippers on. And one of those writers, I think, was defending that, saying kids know that violence happens in the world. What we need to communicate to them through our fairy stories is that there's an overarching moral framework which is just as real, and that in the end, the bad guys get their just desserts. I think an important Christian point to repeat is that the good guys aren't completely good. And actually another important Christian point is that the bad guys aren't completely bad.
Yeah.
God's image resides in them.
Yeah, that's a really good, thoughtful thoughts on that. And we'll definitely put some links and comments in the notes for any listeners that maybe want to check out some of these resources. I think, curated lists of these sorts of things are super important, because you never do know, and especially with kids' books, if it's a big one, you don't want to drop 30, 40 euros on something and then be disappointed or upset by something that's included. So I wanted to put something down, and I was curious to hear your thoughts on this. So I have 2 brothers, and my wife has 2 sisters. So having raising up 2 sons, I think when my wife was pregnant, we joked about, if it's a girl, I'll do all it. If it's a boy, you'll have to sort everything out. And you have all the knowledge of stuff when they go through puberty, so we'll just leave all that to you. And, that's a jokingly way of saying you've actually got the experience. Obviously, in practice, when we get closer to puberty ages and having some of these deep conversations, which we know as Christians aren't going to be maybe backed up, if they are in a secular school, they might not be backed up by what they're hearing from their friends or their teachers. So, these are the things that weigh on my mind as we're this maybe a few years away, but I do still think about it. We obviously are going to be a team, but at the end of the day, I am the man and I have the experience with other brothers. Therefore, it most likely will be me kind of taking the lead and, still being a team on the aspect of it. As someone that has a teenage boy and a teenage girl, does this aspect of raising your kids ever come into how you approach these things with your wife?
Yes. I do think that I rely on my wife not only to teach explicitly to my daughter, expectations of Christian sexual ethics, but to teach implicitly what does it look like to be a Christian grown woman, and how can I honor all those things when our culture is, on the one hand, still implicitly recognizing constantly that men and women are different.
Yeah.
There's just no getting around it. And you cannot pretend. Reality will get you, but they are pretending as hard as they can in as many areas of life as they can that the differences don't matter. And so ever to point out unique glories of masculinity or of femininity is offensive to our culture. And I have noticed among my children the world's talking points pop up. And I don't know where they're coming from. I have some guesses, but there's just no way to insulate them from all of that. So I want my wife not only to teach verbally what's true about femininity, but to teach by example. And I want to teach what's true about masculinity and how it relates to femininity, not only by words, but by example. And I've been paying attention to this now my entire adult life, because this is the area where our culture in the West, the Western world, is pushing back as hard as it can on Christian ethics. I want to show my children the beauty of a Christian marriage in which I am all man and my wife is all woman. And we glory in our complementary differences. I'm not going to throw my weight around. I literally could. One time, my kids, my 2 eldest kids, especially, got into this phase where they like to wrestle. And my eldest son could naturally beat, his 2 younger siblings. And they begged mom and dad to wrestle. And it's the only time in my entire marriage in which I have ever used physical force of any kind on my wife. It feels even weird to talk about it. The point of the wrestling was you have to to grab your opponent's toe and hold it for 3 seconds. They called it toe wrestling. I don't know where they came up with this, and they just begged us to do it. And it was just noticeable. It was easy. I'm not really a big buff guy. I don't like work out, although I do play ultimate frisbee, and so I keep up my cardio. But I have physical strength that nobody else in my family has. My eldest son is becoming a big bruiser. He's really getting there. But I was able to beat, even without having to really try, everybody else in my family. I want my use of physical strength to point up the glories of being a man without in any way denigrating the glories of being a woman. I wouldn't say this has all been easy. Our culture does not make it easy, but I've been sort of grateful that the culture is forcing me to clarify and go back to my Bible over and over again. What does the Bible teach about men and women? When it comes to, the boys are mine and the girls are my wife, my girl is my wife's, that just hasn't ended up being the case. We speak truth to them any chance we get.
Yeah.
And sometimes they raise questions with me. Sometimes they raise questions with my wife. The talk about sex. I had it with my eldest. We used, I think, some Focus on the Family books that were age graded, and I thought did a really, really good job of being age graded. And then I think my wife ended up doing it with the other two, even though one of them's a boy, because he happened to ask at the time when I wasn't available, and so she had the talk with him. So I don't feel jealous to have to be the one to have that talk. Yeah, I don't know if that answers your questions there. That's just what we've done. I never, the rare times when I talk about parenting, I feel zero arrogance and pride. It's been very difficult. I feel like a natural dad. My dad was a very good dad, so I did have a good model to use, and he's a Christian and was a Christian. I don't think I've lived up to his model. I just can say I love my children. I love my wife. I'm trying to follow the Bible. And when I sin, I try always to apologize, even to my children. And that's about all I can say for myself.
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you. I think you get to the end of the day sometimes, and it's like because I'm currently a stay-at-home dad, so I'm with my kids. I've dropped my oldest to school, and I'm with my youngest. And yeah, there are days. They're a lot better now. The oldest is back at school, but throughout summer there were some tough days, and like trying to manage their emotions and their energy levels. And yeah, you just get to the end of the day and think, and like trying to go to bed, but like at least being able to read a psalm and say a prayer to God and to think, I did make some good choices today. Tomorrow I can go again, and like I can go again because you love me, God.
Yeah. Yes.
Like that's everything I come back to, and I've tried my best. More so in conversations with parents, like in person, because I try to base a lot of what I say out of even some training I did as a teacher, as in terms of how you label people and how you label things. I try not to think of myself as like a good dad or a bad dad. I just think of myself as like, I've made some good choices today. I've made some good actions today. Like they've been happy. Things have gone well.
I like that.
But then if things haven't gone well and maybe I've got angry and I've raised my voice a little bit, I've lost my cool, that was a bad choice. And I try to go to bed at the end of the day and just say, Lord, that was bad. I'm really sorry for that. Let's
me too.
Help me be better tomorrow. And I genuinely am amazed when I meet a dad who's like, a really well-arranged, well-organized, on top of things, knocking things down, just being super, super dad. And then I found out he's not a Christian. I was like, how is anyone able to put all this together without the perfect model of fatherhood of our Lord? So there's one more topic I want to cover before the final question, which does relate to what we were just talking about, if that's all right. And that is, if anyone is at this stage and they are wanting to kind of reflect this Christian life for their kids, maybe they're a Christian dad, maybe they're not a Christian dad, but anyone that's grown up kind of similar to me who didn't have that earthly model of a Christian dad, like, do you have any advice like for someone that's trying to raise their kids in that environment, who can't look to, I had a great dad and he led me to Jesus? How does someone who doesn't have that experience kind of do the same for their kids?
So I've never had that experience, and I can only give advice based on, of course, scripture, but also on my own experience watching other people go through that. So when it comes to scripture, where I feel on solid ground, I would just say it's the basics. The basics of the Christian life are not that complicated. You acknowledge you're a sinner. You're going to sin. It's going to happen. You're going to get mad at those kids unless you are super dad. Some dads, some people are just gifted with personalities where they don't get angry ever. They're supernaturally patient almost. But I know very few people like that, Christian or non-Christian, it seems to me. You're going to get mad. You're going to respond in ways that you're not proud of. And so you got to go to whoever you sinned against or whoever saw you sin, and you have to apologize. And more importantly, you have to view your sin as being against God. You have to apologize in such a way that it does not blame others for your sin. Actually, we have a classic line in my family. One of my children, one of the things that's hardest for me, and I'm not excusing my sin, but it's just, I observe it's hard. When my kids were little, they would come up and try to hit me, playfully. But if they hit me in the glasses, that just would make me roar, especially if I'm surprised and I'm hit in the face in the glasses. I mean, that's a pretty big temptation to anger. Not justifying my anger, but one time one of my children came up and whapped me in the face from behind unexpectedly with a pool noodle, knocked my glasses off. I roared in anger. And in pain and surprise, but the anger was clear. And I had to go to my 8-year-old, and I said, "I'm sorry that I got so angry at you when you hit me in the face unexpectedly with a pool noodle." and my child said to me, "Dad, you said never to say what the other person did to you when you said you were sorry." And I was like, "You are right." And so I'm sorry for that. And we still laugh about that, and that's our stock example. Yeah, the basics of Christian behavior just don't change when it's your kids who are the objects of your sin. But then when it comes to my experience watching others, I would say you do seem to need a model. I've just heard too many times people say, both fathers and mothers, that they ape the models they've gotten. And I've heard people say, I don't have Bible for this, but there is something natural to being a mother. Not that every single woman gets it, but when you bear this child and have to feed this child from your own breasts, there's something that women just seem to naturally fall into and are capable of nurturing. And for men, it does appear, and this is not Bible, this is just my observation. I'm just take it for what it's worth. More difficult for us. I do think that being able to hang out with a mature Christian dad in your church, being able to see what he does, and begging that family to be very practical with you. How do you discipline? What are your rules for screen time? For this, you've got kids in the next phase beyond my kids' ages. Please tell me, what does a day look like? And treat me like I myself am a preschooler. I need to know every little detail. And then you acknowledge, okay, you mentioned Proverbs 22:6. One of the creative interpretations that I do not adopt of this verse is that you should train up a child according to his own bent. Nonetheless, I think of that bad interpretation of that good verse on a regular basis because you've got a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old. You've known, I feel certain, ever since they were tiny, that they're different. They have different personalities. And all 3 of our children are very different. I would encourage someone who's trying to do this for the first time in their experience, trying to parent kids from a Christian perspective. I would encourage a dad and a mom to recognize that all of our children are made in God's image. And yet one of the most amazing things about God's creativity is that we can have 10 children and literally all of them would be different, unique personalities. That is absolutely the case. And so we don't have a one-size-fits-all policy in discipline, in the way we handle problems. We handle each child according to what works for them, while trying to still hew to Bible. Those are the pieces of probably standard advice that I would give out.
Yeah, no, that's really good. Thanks for sharing. I think just on the back of that, I'm that really annoying person that goes to other people that are further along and say, "Hey, your kids are a bit older than me. Can I just talk to you and badger you?" And like, "Hey, go away. I'm trying to do something." I think
Yeah.
I'm trying to find a balance in terms of how much I annoy people a little bit further along than me, and then how much I just kind of like trust and like find faith in God that I'm doing enough of the right stuff that like I don't need to be badgering people constantly. But just to add on, you were saying that our kids are made in God's image, and we're saying that we're sinning against them. We're sinning against like what God has blessed us with. Like
Right.
I feel so lucky to be blessed with two amazing sons. So yeah, when my head hits that pillow, and it's super important for me to just say like, yeah, Lord, you've given me such this blessing, such an amazing blessing of these two sons. I have to be open and upfront and bring this up and just, I'm sorry for it if I've done something bad, if that anger has got the better of me. Future Laurence here again. Unfortunately, we also lost the final question of our interview, where I asked Mark to reflect back on becoming a dad for the very first time and think about what advice he might have given to himself, the same question that we ask every guest when they come on that dialogue. Thankfully, Mark was very gracious with his time, and he was able to record us a separate response video for us to listen to his response to that question. Obviously, he's wearing different clothes because it's filmed at a completely different time, but here's Mark.
Okay, this is a really tough one for me because on the one hand, I think I was given a lot of good teaching on marriage and parenting. And in a way, I mean, if I say not a whole lot about it surprised me, that might sound arrogant, but I think that's only because wise people taught me and I sat in their classes and sermons and Sunday schools. I think, though, that what I wish I had settled a little better was actually a theology of parenting. That is huge questions like, should I be a father at all? And I think I could have and should have shepherded my wife better in theological expectations of why we're doing this, and when all the difficulties come, how will we regard those as Christians? I think another element here, and this is more cultural, I mean, not theological, but I just read an article today or yesterday by Louise Perry in the New York Times. And she is a recent convert to Christianity, has written excellent stuff on marriage and sexuality, and has been very critical of the sexual revolution even before she was a Christian. She has a book, Against the Sexual Revolution, and she was noting something I've seen before, that there was more help for young moms in a pre-atomistic, individualistic society. And whereas being part of a village does lay burdens on you, it does give you benefits. And it's nice to be atomistic when you're young and single, but when you're a mom of young kids, it's really hard. I think I knew it was going to be hard, but I didn't really perceive how much of a burden it was on my wife, even just physically, to have to care for kids all day long. My wife in particular was facing physical weakness that we didn't understand at the time. I mean, that'd be another thing I'd like to go tell that young husband, like, go get your wife fixed up. She's got some health problems that you didn't really even realize until they were fixed many years later. I also would have stopped homeschooling sooner. I wish I could have told young Mark, you don't have to do that. We have schools for a reason, and I knew that, but I still kind of we wanted to give our kids the best, but it just did not fit our family very well, and certainly once they got into middle school. Back to the theological expectations, I think, whether you're a Credo Baptist or a Paedo Baptist plays into this, but if you truly believe the gospel, I think you're going to end up with some of the same basic questions. How do I teach my children to be Christians when I can't make them Christians? What kind of expectations do I have for spiritual activities like prayer or Bible reading when they're just children or when they're adolescents who haven't clearly made a profession of faith? I'm still struggling with those, and I wish I had better answers.
And there we have another dad dialogue conversation, a little bit more disjointed than usual, with us having to drop in a few of these video clips to kind of fill us in and explain ourselves. But I really was appreciative of Mark for recording that extra clip for us, responding to that final question. And I was really appreciative of his honesty and vulnerability with that answer, of looking back and, being aware that he's learned a lot, and he's had very wise counsel from lots of people. So he can't really see there's been too much that needed to change. but also just in terms of supporting his wife as well. I found that was a really interesting reflection point of maybe these things he should have acted on more quickly. And I think that's definitely a really big thing that we as dads and husbands need to be aware of and be mindful of what is actually going on with our wife. Is there something that is happening health-wise? There's obviously pregnancy and birth is just so monumental, something we can never fully understand ourselves as men. We'll never be able to go through it. So really being an advocate for our wife in that situation. So I was really thankful for Mark's openness and honesty with that answer, as well as just throughout the episode being very vulnerable in terms of, feeling like a failure at times of being a father, something that, I think we all feel sometimes, of, taking actions, making decisions that aren't aligned to what we believe is the best choice. But things just get the better of us sometimes. And I really like Mark was always bringing it back to sin, and that's what it is. And the sin is there, and like our body has sin, but we are called to bigger and better things. So yeah, just hearing Mark talk about parenting was super gracious, super thoughtful, I thought, and really, really did impact me. And I've been thinking a lot about it during the editing process as well. So please go and check out his channel and his other resources. I'll put links up in the description for that. I'd really recommend, if you have access to Right Now Media, to do his course on there. If you do, or you can subscribe to his YouTube channel, and there's access for that course as well through a paid membership, as he mentioned. So I would really recommend doing that if you are interested. You can find him, as I said, Ward on Words. Link will be in the description, as well as I'm going to include some links to some of the resources that we spoke about, such as the books that we mentioned and even the article that he referenced. I will leave a link into that as well. So yeah, make sure you're checking out the description, the show notes. If there's anything more you'd like to learn, you can reach me, daddialogue.co.uk. You can get in contact with me there if you'd like to, or sign up to be a guest on a future episode. Thank you for listening to the Dad Dialogue podcast, especially if you've made it all the way to the end and you're still hearing me talk. So thank you so much for being an avid listener or watcher, or someone stuck doing the washing up, not able to change the outro of the podcast. But with all that being said, I'm so thankful that you're listening to Dad Dialogue podcast. I hope you have an awesome day, and I hope to talk to you again soon. Goodbye.